Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this Stephen King video, it's going to be about Stephen King's strong starts, but bad finishes. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to title the video yet, but basically you get the idea that sometimes Stephen King can have strong beginnings to his books and stories, but can oftentimes lead to bad results or bad endings, or just it's like strong start, but it can kind of fizzle out by the end. And I've got 10 books to talk about here. And normally with Stephen King, he is what some people would call a discovery writer. So he starts with an idea. He's not quite sure like where it's going to go, but he'll have an idea and then he'll kind of just go from there, which oftentimes can lead to having really strong starts to books because he can just he's got the crystal clear idea where to start, but then it can kind of fizzle out by the time you get to the end because he's not sure where the story's going to go. And that's what I think, at least in my opinion, is what these books are for me. I know for a lot of people, they're going to disagree with me, especially for the first book. And I'm not going to rank these. I'm just going to go in pub order, which is not good for me because the first book, you'll see. But for me, a lot of the times, a lot of people will say like, oh, Stephen King just has bad endings in general. But for me, I'm looking at a lot of his books. A lot of his books have strong endings, or, some of them they took a little bit of time for me to get into, and then the endings was actually worth it. But for me, this is the opposite. So like King books that have really strong beginnings, but bad endings, or just, strong start, bad finish. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So I mentioned that the first book is a bit unfortunate for me. I am going in pub order, and this happens to be the oldest of the bunch. And for me, that would be The Stand. And hear me out, don't click off yet. But for me, The Stand is his most overrated book. And I know so many people love it, but for me, The Stand has one of Stephen King's strongest starts. It's written in 3 parts. Part 1 is amazing. If I was just ranking part 1, it would be 5 stars because it's just got so many great characters, and it's kind of the start of the apocalypse, and it's really kind of the main horror aspect of the books. Like part 1 is tremendous. Thoroughly enjoyed it. But then we get to parts 2 and 3, and for me, the story just becomes a snail pace, and I really didn't love the direction that it went in, and it was very slow for me. The characters were still good, but just not enough was happening, and it just wasn't nearly as good as what part 1, the beginning, was. And then, of course, the ending for me definitely falls flat. I know it does for a lot of people. I know a lot of people will defend the ending, but for me, it's one of Stephen King's worst endings, if not his worst. So this is definitely a clear-cut example for me that Stephen King, is really good at beginnings, but can sometimes fall off a cliff for me. But yeah, very strong start for The Stand, but for me, a bad finish. Next up in pub order, a few years later, because that was the uncut version, but a few years later, he would release Gerald's Game, which for me is a great book. But the start of the book, and I would even say like the start in the middle of the book, are better than the ending of the book. And basically, if you don't know, Gerald's Game is about a woman who goes up to a cabin for vacation with her husband, and he decides to do this sexy game with his wife where she's handcuffed to the bed. But unfortunately for both of them, he has a heart attack and dies, and she's stuck in handcuffs on the bed, and she can't get out. And very strong start, because that's just a very scary premise of like, oh, this could happen to a lot of people, and like, what do you do in that scenario? So a lot of the book is her trying to figure out how to get out, and also kind of a past reflection on her life and all the weird stuff that happened in her life. So really strong start, really strong middle, but for me, the ending, kind of the aftermath of all of this craziness, is not quite as good. It might go on a little bit too long. In fact, I know my wife, she really liked this book, but she really wished like the last 100 pages could have been just cut out of the book. For me, like maybe not that extreme, but maybe like condensed a little bit. The ending, it does kind of fizzle out a little bit. Definitely a strong start and strong middle, but the ending does leave a little left to be desired. And so, yeah, definitely a stronger start than a stronger finish. Next up, we kind of have a tale of two halves, and a couple of years later, we have Rose Matter. So for me, it's not even just like a strong like start and a bad finish. It's literally like the first half of the novel is so good, and then the second half of the novel is not very good, in my opinion, for Rose Matter. So Rose Matter basically starts out with a woman who's running away from an abusive cop husband. So she moves and he's trying to catch her, find her, and it's really gripping. And I really like the main character, and I love how the story progresses. Like the first half is really good. The second half is where King kind of shoehorns in a supernatural element that I did not enjoy, and overall just the second half was just not for me. So for me, this is a clear-cut example of like a really strong start and pretty good middle, and then kind of transitions into what I don't like about the book, the second half and the ending. So a really strong start, but a pretty poor ending in my mind. Next up, we have Hearts in Atlantis, which is a really interesting kind of collection, or a mosaic novel, as some people like to say. It really consists of 2 novellas and 3 short stories that kind of all intermingle and connect at the very end. For me, the 2 novellas are very strong. I really enjoy the novellas. But for me, which, the novellas take up maybe like 75% of the book or so, which is my favorite part of the book. So really strong start, but for me, the short stories, they're not my favorite. And while they do connect everything, I kind of just prefer to read the novellas on their own. I really like the novellas, but the short stories, which kind of ends the collection, don't really do it that for me that much. So for me, Hearts in Atlantis, really strong start with the 2 novellas, but by the end, the short stories don't do much for me. Next up, we have yet again another example of a book that's written in 3 parts. Part 1 is amazing, at least in my opinion, and then parts 2 and 3 aren't nearly as good. And that would be Dreamcatcher. So for me, well, I should say, first off, a lot of people cite this as one of Stephen King's worst books, if not his worst book. Stephen King himself says that this is not a very good book. But for me, part 1 was really, really good. It's classic Stephen King, introducing these group of characters. You get perspectives from their childhood and as adults, and just very weird and peculiar characters that I really liked. Really good group of friends, and some weird stuff starts happening when they go into a cabin in the middle of the woods in winter. And sorry, my printer was just making a weird noise. But anyway, part 1 of Dreamcatcher, thoroughly enjoyed. And then it kind of goes off the rail and becomes quite boring in parts 2 and 3. And, it kind of loses its steam, really. Like, I don't necessarily think this is, like, absolutely Stephen King's one of his worst books, but it is definitely, like, bottom tier. And it just really loses steam because part 1 was so good, and then it just kind of goes off the rails and it's quite boring. So yeah, part 1, really strong start, but definitely a poor ending and poor finish. Next up, we have a Dark Tower novel, and this is definitely, of the main 7, because probably my least favorite is Wind Through the Keyhole, but of the main 7 Dark Tower novels, this is definitely my least favorite, which comment down below if you agree or disagree with me. But Wolves of the Calla, for me, definitely has a strong start to it, like with, the quartet kind of showing up in a different setting, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and the explanation of everything. Some good stuff happens. So really strong start, but for me, there's a middle chunk of this book that I've never really enjoyed. You're getting a character's backstory. It's just super long and drawn out, and I've never really cared for it. I know a lot of people say that's one of their favorite parts of the book, but for me, it's definitely one of the worst parts of the book. So it's a really bad middle. And then after that, there's some interesting stuff. But for me, this book is pretty anticlimactic because it kind of all leads up to one event. And that event is just happens so fast. Like, this is like a 900-page book, and like that very ending stuff just goes by so quick, and it's very anticlimactic for me. So a really strong start with a really kind of poor middle, with like a character's backstory. It just goes on for too long. And then kind of the ending thing, like what we're leading up to, kind of just goes by too quick, and it's a little anticlimactic. So definitely for me, like out of all the Dark Tower books, like really strong start, but kind of a bad finish, in my opinion. Next up, we have another chunky book, and that's definitely a theme for a lot of these books. Like when Stephen King writes chunky books, they often have really great starts, but they can either just fizzle out or they have bad endings. And for me, this has both. Under the Dome has such a really great start, an amazing premise of this town getting covered in a giant, mysterious, unknown dome. The unknown dome. Whatever. But anyway, like really cool premise and, pretty interesting characters. And it's really interesting to see how the town reacts initially. But I will say about halfway through, one of our main characters gets in a situation and really he's not much of a, like, something happens. I can't spoil it, obviously, but something happens and his story is kind of moot from that point, because it's just like you're kind of wasting potential here. And then obviously the ending is definitely, for me, one of Stephen King's worst endings. We kind of get a reveal, and that reveal is just so stupid in my mind. I did not like it. So for me, definitely a clear-cut example of Stephen King having a really strong start, a really interesting and cool premise, but for me, the payout just isn't there. The ending and the reveal is just not great. So Under the Dome, great start, bad finish. Bad finish. And if y'all didn't hate me enough for The Stand being included on the list, y'all are going to hate me now, because in my mind, this is another clear-cut example of a really strong start from Stephen King, but he just goes in a direction that I did not like. And that would be 11/22/63. And again, really strong start here. I love the premise of going back in time to prevent the JFK assassination. But what I don't like is you kind of taking a pause on that to tell a romance story that I just don't care for. So yeah, really strong start with a really poor middle, at least in my opinion. I know a lot of y'all, a lot of King fans, or non-King fans too, they disagree that this is one of King fandom's and non-King fandom's favorite books of all time. Which is fine. I think it's one of his most overrated book. It's either this or The Stand, really. But yeah, really strong start in my opinion, but it definitely fizzles out and I kind of lose interest about halfway through. Really strong start, but for me, fizzles out. And yeah, I won't call the ending bad necessarily, but it's definitely a stronger start than a stronger finish. And next up, I'm kind of cheating a little bit. I know I said I had 10 books here, but this one, I actually have a trilogy of books. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I could have included his other trilogy too. Maybe I'll pull that out too. But anyway, I'm talking about the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, the Bill Hodges trilogy. So for me, book 1 is pretty good. And then book 2, Mr. Mercedes, book 1, is pretty good. Book 2, Finders Keepers, is really good. Really should have just been a standalone. But either way, really good. And then End of Watch just sucks. This is one of my least favorite King books. Again, he shoehorns in a supernatural element that does not need to be there. Really did not like the ending, conclusion, just really this whole book. So really strong start to the trilogy, but then just bad finish to the trilogy with End of Watch. And then along those same lines, we have Gwendy. So I think Gwendy's Button Box is really good. One of my favorite Stephen King novellas. I really like the story. It's super short and succinct, and it's just really good. And I like the character of Gwendy. And it really should have just stayed with this one. But for some reason, we get books 2 and 3. Book 2 is horrible. It's not even written by Stephen King. It's written solely by Richard Chismar. And this book is just not good. I did not like it. It sucks. And then book 3 also sucks, but it sucks slightly less. It's Gwendy's Final Task, and it's not good. And it does, have some Dark Tower stuff in it, but it's just not worth it, man. Gwendy's Button Box should have been a standalone. And really, it's one of those rare things where, like, reading book 2 and 3 made me like book 1 less, which really sucks because book 1 I thoroughly enjoyed the first time I read it. But afterwards, knowing what's to come, it makes me like book 1 less. So definitely had to include that here. I'm glad that I remembered that. So yeah, really strong start to this trilogy. But books 2 and 3, bleh, bleh, bleh. And the last book I have to show y'all is one of Stephen King's newest books. Came out a few years ago. Really strong start. Like, I was reading this and I was just like, man, this could be one of my new favorite King books. But then the second half of the book happens and I just did not care at all. And I'm of course talking about Fairy Tale. So a lot of people who have reviewed this book, at least in this corner of BookTube, agree with me. You know, the first third or the first like 40% of this book is amazing. Classic Stephen King writing. Love the characters. Love the storytelling. It's amazing. But then you get to the actual portal fantasy aspect of this book where the character goes into this portal fantasy realm. And everything after that just falls very flat. Not good. And it just really suffers from there on. So like the first couple of 100 pages, amazing. I loved it, loved it, loved it. And then after that, it kind of sucks, honestly. So a clear example. And again, this is one of his newer books. So he's still doing this where he has an amazing start and it just fizzles out and just a bad finish. So one of his newer examples, Fairy Tale. All right, so those were 10 books, or really 11, like 11 books or trilogies or how have you, a bunch of Stephen King books that have a really strong start, but a bad finish. And of course, this was all subjective. I know a lot of y'all are probably going to disagree with me, and I'd love to chat about it with you in the comments. So definitely comment down below whether you agree or disagree with me in the comments. Also, let me know what I got right, what I got wrong, and what are some Stephen King books for you, in your subjective opinion, that had a strong start but a bad finish. So comment all that down below and we'll chat about it. And of course, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big fat thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you are subscribed, stay subscribed for more content. I try to do videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Every Friday is Stephen King related videos, and I'm trying to continue to come up with ideas. If you've got any for me, comment down below, and I'll try my best to get to it as soon as possible. I've also got the Book of Strummer Discord down below, where one of the things we like to do there is the Stephen King Book Club. Our pick for July is going to be The Colorado Kid, an underrated gem, at least in my opinion, so hopefully y'all will come check that out with us. I've also got my Patreon link down below if you want to go support me there for as little as $1 a month. And I have my Amazon wishlist if you'd like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic day. Blah, blah, blah.